Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, the Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow. With me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. And tonight, we're not broadcasting on TikTok, unfortunately, because our mobile phone has run out of battery and we have not been able to recharge it in time for the program. And the reason for that is because we have been out in action all day. Out in action all day, and we have been confronting, we have been challenging, we have been dealing with John Swinney's so-called conference, so-called summit on the quote-unquote far right in Scotland. He held it today in Glasgow, and we're going to be talking all about that this evening, and we've got some great photographs of our event to also share with you tonight. So it's been a busy day. It's been a busy day and it's been a fun day. And it's also been the 23rd of April, which is St. George's Day, the man whose flag is behind me. So to all those who celebrate St. George's Day, a happy St. George's Day to you from Scotland's premier pro-UK campaigning organisation. And we do love the Patron Saints Day. And, you know, we were in town today, obviously, in George Square, just around from George Square, where John Swinney was holding his conference. And we looked up at the flagstaff at the top of the beautiful Glasgow City Chambers. And it's been a long-running policy of ours that if we were ever in charge of Glasgow City Council, we would ensure that St. George's Day and St. Patrick's Day and St. David's Day were celebrated or at least acknowledged by the flagpole on top of the city chambers, flying the flag of that home nation. But alas, it did not occur to anybody in the city chambers to say or to present a motion that on this day, the 23rd of April, that the city chambers should fly the flag of St. George. Well, they're pretty quick off the mark to fly one or two other flags that shall remain nameless. So why don't they fly the flag of St. George on St. George's Day? The flag of St. David on St. David's Day? The flag of St. Patrick on St. Patrick's Day? Because I can tell you, in my experience, there's quite a number of Irish people, there's quite a number of Welsh people, and there's quite a number of English people who actually live in Glasgow. So if we're all about being inclusive, then wouldn't that be a good idea? I'm sorry, am I the only person who's ever thought of that before? Has that not literally occurred to anybody in the city chambers that would be a good idea? That would be a good idea. Why don't we fly the flag of St. George on St. George's Day? Oh, well, maybe one of these days that will occur to the bright minds in our wonderful city chambers to be so inclusive and to be so diverse that they might actually bother to acknowledge the patron saint's day. Or maybe I'm missing something, seriously, folks, maybe to get up to the flagpole, maybe that's a life-threatening occupation, maybe that's too hazardous. I really don't know anything about that, but you would have thought it wouldn't be too complicated, right? Anyway, it's beyond them, and it's proven beyond them in the 26 years that I have lived in this great British city of Glasgow. They've never thought to acknowledge the patron saints' days of any of the other parts of our beautiful islands. Anyway, maybe someday that will change, and maybe in the future we'll get people into the city chambers who'll go, hey, I've got a good idea. Why don't we celebrate St. Patrick's Day? Why don't we celebrate St. David's Day? Why don't we celebrate St. George's Day, just in the same way that we always commemorate St. Andrew's Day? It's just a thought, guys. I'm just putting it out there. It's for free. Take it or leave it. Anyway, it's been a great day today. Really enjoyed it. What's going on in the comments? Derek, good evening, Alistair and AFFG family. What a great day for democracy. We showed Scotland and the rest of the UK we have had enough, didn't we? Just 100%. 100%. Okay. Derek says, for those who are complaining about the sound on our live feed this morning, they might want to put their hands in their pockets and give cash for audio equipment. Well, that's a thought. That's a thought. But do you know, we're not CNN, we're not Sky Television, we're not BBC, we are not even STV, right? We're not even STV. Okay, so we don't have, unfortunately, satellites in the sky. We don't have access to the sort of equipment that will give good audio live. And so it's always going to be hit and miss as far as the audio on our live broadcasts is concerned. We do our best. We do our best. And often our best is not good enough. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. And we're always struggling to try to do better. Oksana, nice to hear from you, says, evening, well done for today. You were interviewed by LBC. We were indeed interviewed by LBC. Let me tell you about that, Oksana. That was a carry-on. Did you get, or did anyone get footage of inside the venue? We did not get inside the venue. We did not get footage of inside the venue, although there is footage, official footage from the actual show on the day. The LBC woman, right? I don't know her name, and I don't want to mention any names. I've got a suspicion, but I don't want to say who it was in case I got it wrong. But she was really a bit like, not really being in good faith, shall we say. And here's the thing, right? I said to her, because I thought this is my big point, right? I goes, do you know what? For the last year for which we have official statistics, and I even said to her, from the National Records of Scotland, which released their details in October 2024, the last statistics that they had was from June 22 to June 23. And in that 12-month period, 83,000 people came into Scotland. Long-term immigrants, which means, according to the UN definition, people who are to stay in Scotland for more than a year, 83,000 immigrants from outside of the United Kingdom came into Scotland in the space of 1 year. That's gross. If you take away those who left to go abroad, it still works out at 47,000. And she goes, but there's only 47,000. That's not very many. And he goes, well, 47,000 is literally almost exactly the population of the city of Inverness. Are you saying that a city of Inverness coming into Scotland each year is not an issue? And we'd had a wee bit of a back and forth on that, but it occurred to me that she did not think that was an issue. And so I'm at the stage where, okay, I think that adding a city of Inverness to Scotland per year is a big issue. She doesn't think it's a big issue. There's no common ground there. There's no common ground. I think adding a population to Scotland equivalent to the city of Inverness of fully grown men largely is an issue. She doesn't think it's an issue. So where can we meet? You know, where is the common ground that we can meet there? It's like there's no common ground. And that bothers me. That bothers me. And I also pointed out, like, this is not 47,000 babies in the sense, like, if it was babies, then they're going to take 80 years to go through the system, to grow up, to go to school, to get NHS treatment, to find a job, to pay taxes, to have a family, then eventually to retire and then to die. No, this is like a ready-made population of fully grown adults, boom, implanted into the country. That's a big issue for me. For me, a city of ready-grown adults implanted into Scotland equivalent net, a city the size of Inverness, gross, a city the size of Paisley, the 5th largest city in Scotland. You know, these are issues, but if you don't think those numbers are relevant, then we have nothing to connect us. We have nothing to agree upon. She thinks that's fine. I don't think that's fine. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think it's possible, and I don't want it. So that was the woman from LBC. Anyway, we did get some publicity today. Derek says, "Happy St. George's Day." Oksana thinks they'll fly anything but the English flag in Britain at the moment. James says anyone would think that Anglophobia was rampant in the Glasgow Council. Anthony, you did some great work today, Anthony. You're a star. It was a great day indeed. Hi to Derek from Armadale. James says, well, the LBC are EU-loving, pro-immigration, left-wing gentlemen and gentlewomen. I got called scum today. I got called scum. More of that in a moment. Exile Viking says that he missed this morning's gathering because he wasn't aware until 2 hours later. Well, let me tell you something about that, Exile Viking. John Swinney was so keen. He was so keen to involve Scottish civic society, which is a phrase that he totally loves, right? He loves the phrase Scottish civic society. Or is it civil society? Scottish civil society. whatever. He loves that phrase because it just sounds so modern and beautiful to his ears. But what he means by that is not people like you and I, it's people that he pays to be sycophants for him. It's people who he pays that, as I said today, suck off the teat of the Scottish executive, which is to say you and I, the taxpayers, the people who the public sector people who only have a job because of John Swinney and because of the non-governmental organizations and charities that John Swinney and his crew fund. He loves that element of Scottish civic society. He doesn't love Scottish civic society embodied by Alistair McConnachie or embodied by the people who view this program or the people who love the United Kingdom here in Scotland. He doesn't love those elements of Scottish civil society. He just loves the ones that he pays and who owe their everything to him. He loves them, and they're the ones that he will support. And they're the ones that he invited to his quote unquote summit today. And goodness me, I mean, we were there at 10 o'clock in the morning. We arrived up there, and apparently the chosen members of Scottish Civic Society had already gone into the building. So we missed them just by a few moments. And we've yet to find out really who they were. And it would be interesting to find out. And it's also notable that they have not told us who they were. Like nobody said, yes, check it out. I've been invited to John Swinney's great gathering. Nobody, if you notice on Facebook, in the run up to today or today, has said, I was there. Check it out. Here's my ticket. What a cool guy I am. No. If they've been invited, it's like something to be embarrassed about. They have not mentioned it to the world. And that speaks volumes. And we got an inkling of this about a week ago. We're like, well, where's he going to hold this? Can I get an invite? You know, and suddenly we started making inquiries, and we just met like a brick wall of silence. In other words, this wasn't something that people were bragging about. This wasn't the hottest ticket in town. It was something that you're going to get invited to, but you're going to have to keep it quiet because we don't want people to know who's there or who's got an invite or where it is. So he wanted to bring people together essentially, but he didn't want to tell anybody where it was or what was happening or anything like that. So immediately we began to sniff and smell it out and realize that something was not quite right here. So we do have a picture of the top table of people, and we'll just put the picture up here. And there, from the far left there, you've got Nat King Cole. No, sorry, not Nat King Cole. Alex Cole Hamilton. Last we heard, he was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, all 3 or 4 of them in the Scottish Parliament, and somehow that qualifies him to sit there. The Greens, they've played a trick. They've got 2 leaders. So they have got the Canadian, presumably dual citizen woman, Lorna Slater, and the Green Goblin, Patrick Harvey, sitting beside him. Now, if the Lib Dems had the wherewithal, they could have a woman leader as well. So they could have had another person on the panel, but they missed a trick there. But the Greens have played that trick and they've been allowed to get away with it. So they've got 2 representatives. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Anyway, next to the Green Goblin is a woman that's launched on the scene just recently. She's called Roseanne Foyer. I don't know. She's somebody from the Scottish Trade Unions Council. Enough said. You know what you're going to hear from her without knowing any more. We've got Slender Man Swinney in the middle. To his left, unknown female. Literally nobody knows who that female is. We asked around. Nobody knew who that person was. Could be a genuine NGO woman, or it could just be an imposter. We have literally no idea. I don't think Anna Sarwar, sitting next to her, by the look on his face, knew who she was either. And he's by the look in his face, he's thinking, who's this woman on my right-hand side? And is she meant to be here? And is she related to a Force for Good? We can say she's not a Force for Good member. People have said, is she a secret agent for a Force for Good? No, she's not. We literally don't know who she is either. She somehow managed to get a pass onto the top table, and she sat there and nobody actually challenged her. So maybe in time it'll come out who that actually is. And then next to Anas Sarwar is Ash Regan, who apparently is a member of the Scottish Parliament for a relatively small party called ALBA. In fact, I think she's the only member of ALBA in the Scottish Parliament, and because of that, she was able to sit at the top table. Okay. So that was in the Merchant's House, and the Merchant's House is a well-known building architecturally that sits at the corner of West George Street and George Square. And I know a person who's a member of the Merchant's House, because it's one of these places you can become an official member of. And apparently they're prostituting themselves now to the globalist establishment, which is a great pity, it has to be said. A well-known Scottish and British institution which is selling itself out to the globalists, which currently misrule us. Looking at some of our comments, Paul says, greetings from White Cliffs country. Hope they're looking nice these days. Alan says, anyone who doesn't see an issue here really is hell-bent on destruction or incredibly naive and will absolutely regret their stance once it's too late and will no doubt blame everyone else. Sounds a lot like the Scottish National Party. Paul says, thank you for being the voice of sanity. Thank you, Paul, for acknowledging that we are indeed the voice of sanity. People who welcome debates as Exile Viking. have nothing to hide. But if they're lying, they don't want to discuss it. Well, they certainly, John Swinney and his crew, did not want to discuss anything with us this morning. That's for certain. Clive says, search the Kalergi plan. The Kalergi plan, to our knowledge, is a theory that some people want to flood Europe with non-Europeans in order to get rid of the Europeans. I don't know if it's a plan or not, but it certainly sometimes seems like that is de facto what's happening. Our LBC women would go, well, what's wrong with that then? What's wrong with that happening? Well, I'd rather it didn't happen, actually, Miss LBC reporter. But why not then? Well, just, I'd rather it didn't. I don't see any reason why it should happen, Yes, what a rogues gallery that lot was, and they don't look very inspiring. They look bored. I know. They need people like myself, Alistair McConnachie, and other colleagues of mine on that board. We would shake things up. We totally would shake things up, but we would shake things up to the point that the LBC lady and others like her would literally have a mental breakdown because they wouldn't be able to process it. And John Swinney wouldn't be able to process it. And this is what I was trying to get across to the extent I was able to do so, not on the megaphone, but also to anybody that I was speaking to today, was that, people like John Swinney, their head space is in a different world. Okay, I thought John Swinney was a lot older than me. Turns out he's not a lot older than me. He's only like a couple of years older than me. He looks 15 years older than me, but he's only a couple of years older than me. And so his headspace is, I used to think it was in a 1970s student union. It was actually probably in a 1980s student union. And where he didn't have to bother about, for example, mass immigration or whatever, because that was just a few people, Afro-Caribbeans in London, didn't affect anybody, didn't even affect London that much at that time. But it certainly didn't have any carryover effects into the rest of the United Kingdom. But now that has totally changed, and people here in Scotland are now literally seeing their little Scottish areas changing literally before their eyes. And John Swinney has no response to this, and don't hold out for him being able to get a response to it. Now, we would like to think that he would be able to respond to it, and he would be able to say, in a perfectly kindly and reasonable and intelligently and logical way, hey, let's just put the brakes on here. Let's just pump the brakes a little bit. Okay, too much immigration. Let's roll it back. We need to really cut back on the work visas, the student visas, the family visas. We need to get a grip on all of this nonsense across the English Channel. We need to affirm the sovereignty and the security and the sanctity of our British borders. He needs to just do all of that kind of stuff. He could do that perfectly properly because he is the First Minister of Scotland. That is his role. The very least that we can expect as British citizens is that our leaders understand the importance of our borders and that they have proper borders, they have secure borders, they have safe borders, they have sovereign borders, That's the very least that we can expect that a politician would stand for. But for some reason, well, it's when we all know why, at the end of the day, the idea of border control has been taken out of the normal position that it should fill in normal politics, which is a centrality to it's been pushed out to the fringes. And it's been pushed out to the fringes for various socio-historical reasons. A lot of it related to our the past and World War II and right-wing organizations back in World War II. Oh, they were all for borders for Germany. If we're for borders for Britain, we must be as bad as them. That mentality, completely nonsense, completely bonkers. Yet it has meant that a central part of governance has been relegated to the fringes of um, because of World War II issues, essentially, at the end of the day. And that has corrupted our society. It's corrupted our politics, and it has prevented our politicians from respecting the centrality of border control as simply a necessary part of political life. And we're going to have to get back to understanding border control as a centrality of political life. Well, it shouldn't be that difficult at all, but it appears to be too much for the John Swinneys of this world to accept. And that's it's not just a great pity, but it's a great concern. It's a great concern. Exiled Viking likes our Green Goblin comment. David says, failures they are, sitting in every seat. Paul says, what they need to do, the parties, they need to have a woman leader, a male leader, and a trans woman leader. And that will give them 3 leaders sitting at the summit. John McLean says, Swinney reminds me of the prison warder from the Shawshank Redemption. John says, why is that trade union personnel? Good question. Good question. She doesn't look like she's ever worked a day in her life either. I mean, she's probably been a just time-served apprentice in the office for the last 20 years. William McGinty gives us some bad news. He says, I have a Labour source that told me that Starmer and Swinney are close to making a deal about another referendum. Oh my goodness, William, let us hope that's fake news. But it wouldn't surprise me, it wouldn't surprise me. The Labour people are foolish enough to grant another referendum. The Tories were foolish in the first place to do it in 2014, but I could see Labour being foolish enough as well to do it. For example, if in 2026 next year, Swinney and the Greens and Alba together somehow managed to forge a winning margin in some way, then they could prevail upon Starmer to give them a second referendum. I'd like to think that's unlikely. Firstly, that it would be unlikely that they would forge a significant winning margin next year. And secondly, I'd like to think that even if they did, I would like to think that Starmer would turn them down. But the nature of politics is we can never know from one day to the other. And James is correct. He says he heard that Swinney had barred Reform UK from taking part in the gathering. Well, they did indeed not invite Reform UK, because that wouldn't really have been appropriate for this particular meeting. This meeting was held by Swinney in order to have a go at Reform UK. Now, I was not in the meeting. I've not watched any of the speeches from it yet, so I don't know the extent to which that party was mentioned. What I do know is that we arrived a few moments before Reform UK arrived. So a force for good, we had about 10 folk there. And we jumped into place across the road, right outside the entrance to Merchant's House, with our very visible banners, which we'll show you in a moment or two. And the Reform people turned up and they were like, oh, they've got the position. What do we do now? So they stood across the road directly outside Queen Street Station, and they lined up outside Queen Street Station. There was about 7 or 8 of them, and they had these banners saying, well, no, not banners, but little placards, Corex boards saying, John Swinney is a democracy denier. And they stood there and they got some photographs taken. And Thomas Kerr, who is a Reform Party councillor on Glasgow City Council, he spoke to the media, which included STV, LBC, and Sky. I think Sky was there. Certainly STV and LBC anyway. And so that was fine, but we actually got where Reform wanted to be, but they didn't want to stand with us. They didn't want to stand with our banners because our banners were pretty outspoken. Pretty outspoken. Let's put up some pictures. Let's go through them now. There we go. Mass deportation now. And asylum frauds out. Love it. They're condensed together. You can't get better than that, my friend. Mass deportation now, asylum frauds out. That's a beautiful pic. That's going in a magazine. That's going in a book, that one. Absolutely. And oh, even more asylum frauds out. That's 2 asylum frauds out flags and a mass deportation now. And I have to say, folks, this is the first time that mass deportation now and asylum frauds out has been seen on the streets anywhere in Scotland. A first, 23rd of April 2025. Okay. There you go. There's myself and our sterling activist right there. And on the right there, that's David Ballantyne from Gorilla TV, who's always getting up to mischief. He's a good bloke. He's a good bloke as well. The fellow on the right with his camera, he's always at these events. David Ballantyne, give him a follow. He's on Gorilla TV channel. There's another one. There's another one. Excellent. Okay. There we are. Mass deportation now. And when we say mass deportation, we're talking about illegals. That is to say, people who are in the country illegally, which is to say, people who have been deemed inadmissible asylum seekers, people who have been deemed fraudulent asylum seekers, people who have breached their terms of their visa, people who have overstayed their visa, and people who have committed crimes and are dual citizens and can be deported, or are foreign citizens and can be deported. So we're talking about mass deportation of illegals and criminals who are eligible, shall we say, eligible for deportation. Okay. There we are. Another two of our fantastic activists. Great work, guys. There you go. Can't get enough of that banner. Excellent. Okay. Asylum frauds out. That is such a good slogan. Such a good slogan. Okay. So those were our banners today and our flags. And I want to say a very big thank you to our sterling activists who come out onto the streets. And you know what? We had a very, very good reception. We had, I mean, most, as I always say, 95% of the people in the world are passive. So they're not going to say or do anything. But there is obviously the 5% who have an opinion on things and who will do something. And so of the 5% who passed us today, overwhelmingly, it was nice work, mate. Good stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, beep, 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 beep. Got a few beep, beeps as well from people passing, and got a beep, beep from a bus driver as well, which was always nice to see. And we only had one person, right? We only had one angry, aggressive, ugly in his attitude person. And this was somebody who worked, ironically, for guess what, a refugee charity. Ironically, in the same building as the Merchant's House. And he goes, oh, I work to blah, blah, blah for refugees and asylum seekers. And these are vulnerable people. And see, when they come that vulnerable stuff, it's like, no, they're not vulnerable, mate. And as soon as you cut them down like that, as soon as you say, we're not listening to this vulnerability angle, then they've got nothing to say. They've nothing to say because they realize you're not falling for it. You're not falling for it. And we point out that these people that, as I always say, who come across the English Channel, these are people with agency, okay? These are people who know what they're doing. These are people with self-determination, and you can congratulate them for that, in fact. But they're self-determining individuals. They know what they're doing. Don't try to make me feel sorry for them, okay? They've got their own life going on. Whatever is going on in their life is not my concern, okay? I'm concerned to the extent I'm concerned about things for people in my purview, in my little world, my friends, my family, looking out wider, my neighbours, and the people here in Glasgow. But I cannot be and should not be concerned for everybody in the world. Emmanuel Macron put it well. He said something to the effect that we cannot embrace all the misery of the world. We cannot embrace all the misery of the world because, believe me, every day there's misery in the world. We can do our best to alleviate it. Politically, we can ask our countries, our governments to stop bombing the shit out of other countries. That would certainly help. And I do encourage people to go down that route as well, to encourage our governments to be peaceful. But at the end of the day, we cannot embrace all the misery of the world. And it's not for us. It cannot be for us to embrace that and to make that our lives. So the only person today, in the time that we were out for several hours, the only person who criticized us in a very aggressive manner, I might add, was somebody who literally worked for a refugee NGO. He's literally getting paid by us, the British taxpayer, to do his job, because these NGOs only exist on British taxpayers' money. and he didn't even look like, I mean, he spoke with an English accent, but he looked like a kind of foreigner of some description. So at the end of the day, he with a made up name as well. Don't tell me that was his real name. Seriously. Because he had a little badge on. Anyway, that aside, that was the only aggression that we had, and he lost his head pretty quickly. But and he worked in the same building, and interestingly, he didn't get his mates to come out and confront us either. You know, it's like, oh, they're down there. We'll just hush up here. We'll not say anything. We'll just hide away. Which is just as well, I suppose, for him, because we, on our megaphone, would have told him very quickly where he was going wrong. The Specialist, Sylvester Stallone film. Happy St. George's Day. Happy St. George's Day to you, The Specialist. Willie Brown says, John Swinney's idea of democracy is banning a party, the Reform Party, with the highest growing support in the UK, from speaking on democracy. Road with Purpose says, do you know how many migrants, which is to say asylum seekers, are in a Dumfries hotel? I don't know, but the hotel will be fully booked out. If you know what the hotel is, if you know where the hotel is, if you know how many rooms it has, then you can be certain that it will be at least that number of people. Oksana says the World Economic Forum want a borderless Europe. And I do think that there is a certain truth to the idea that our politicians do follow things like the World Economic Forum. I'm not saying that they're in charge. I don't think that the WEF is in charge, but I do think that they do set an agenda, as it were, that our politicians tend to fit into. I think politicians, most of them, have no real ideology, and so they're looking to adopt ideologies. So if somebody like the World Economic Forum comes along, excuse me, if the World Economic Forum comes along with a ready-made ideology, then I think that politicians can just adopt it. I do think there is a part of that. I don't think the WEF is ultimately in control, though. And as Stephen points out, the mainstream political parties have abandoned the strict conceit of sovereignty. Marjorie says that she read that Glasgow was on the verge of a civil war because of all the immigration. Is that true? Marjorie, that's not true. There's not that degree of widespread concern. What you always find, whether it's in a town or a city or a country, is there's hot spots of concern, and these hot spots are very often just located in certain areas, and often they don't really go beyond those areas. I have not heard of any areas in Glasgow that are on the verge of what might be called civil war. I do know that, generally speaking, there is a particular concern about the levels of, especially refugees who are being given housing. Now, I was asked about this today by somebody that was interviewing me. In fact, it was by the Guerrilla TV man. And he was asking me to explain, why is it that refugees appear to get to the top of the housing ladder before the native Brits? And This is the reason. Let me explain why this is. It's a bug in the system, as they say. It's a problem with the way that the system works. For example, say you're on the housing ladder. Say you're presently in a home. You're living with, say, your mother and father. You have got a roof over your head. So the council has to consider that. However, take refugees. Take a step back. Take an asylum seeker, comes off the boat at Dover, applies for asylum, goes through the system, takes 12 months. They're living in a hotel, courtesy of you and I. They get granted refugee status. So somebody's looked at their application, they've said, yes, he's got a well-founded fear of persecution. Give him refugee status. What that means is that when you get refugee status, you get automatically, on given that refugee status, you get everything that a British citizen would get. So you get automatic right to social housing, automatic right to housing benefit, automatic right to universal benefits, all those sorts of things. You get that for 5 years. It's called refugee leave to remain. Leave, fancy word for permission to remain, for 5 years. So you're now entitled to stay in the UK for 5 years. After 5 years, you can apply for indefinite leave to remain, which you will get. And then after a year, you can apply for British citizenship. But the point is, as soon as you get refugee status, you are given all these benefits. However, what it also means is you have to leave the hotel. So imagine that. Imagine you're an asylum seeker off the boat from Syria or wherever. You don't speak English. You've got very little skills. You're not really culturally compatible. You have now got 8 weeks to get out of the hotel and find accommodation. And that's on you. And there are thousands of these guys leaving hotels every month. And they're going, you're just left to your own devices. So you're going to anywhere. Many are coming to Glasgow because Glasgow has a very welcoming, inverted commas, view of refugees. So you rock up in Glasgow, you've left your hotel in Essex, you've come up on the train to Glasgow, give me a house. And so the Glasgow City Council, or whatever council, is faced with this guy, and it's like, well, we either give this guy a house or he lives under a bridge. So what they do is they give this guy a house or a flat, because the alternative is literally him sleeping on the streets. And so he gets right up there on the housing ladder, and you, who's been living with your parents for the last 10 years, you're just going to have to keep living with your parents, because at least you've got a house, you've at least got a roof over your head. Whereas this guy from Syria, who's now been given refugee status, he's either got to get a flat from the council or he's living under a bridge. So that's how the system ends up elevating these people to the top of the housing list, because it's literally they have got nowhere else to go unless the council gives them a house. That's the absurdity of our refugee system right now. That's one of the reasons why we should not really be having this refugee system, because we need to leave the UN Refugee Convention, and we have to change all of that in such a way that it's not de facto prejudiced towards the refugees. The refugees are always going to get to the top of the housing ladder, because the alternative, if they don't get a house, is homelessness for them. Whereas the alternative for those of us, the Indigenous British, who are looking for a house of our own, we're not, generally speaking, in that sort of in that dichotomy. We're usually still able to stay with our parents or wherever. Alan says, we citizens get checked, scanned, verified when going on holiday. No papers, no travel or access to countries. We should just skip the queues and the bureaucracy and take a boat. Well, sometimes it does seem to work out a lot easier that way. Paul says, Swinney wanted to talk about reform, not to them. They didn't want anything to challenge their fixed ideas. James likes the banners. Thank you, sir. Exiled Viking says he left a message on the AFFG site on the mobile. We'll check the mobile, sir. It is still a valid number. Best way of contacting us is by email at contact@aforceforgood.uk. Contact@aforceforgood.uk is the best way of contacting us. We always see that several times a day. We don't always check our mobile phone messages. Sorry about that. Folks, it's been a busy day. Not everybody can come out on the streets with us. We understand that. We thank everybody who does come out on the streets with us. If you can't come out on the streets with us, please do consider supporting us monthly. Now, you can support us monthly from 69 pence a week, which over the course of 52 weeks divided by 12 equals £3 exactly per month. And that's not very much to ask, really, is it, when at the end of the day? And it really, really does help us. So if you appreciate what we're doing, if you appreciate the voice that we give out there in the world, the message that we convey to the world, please do consider becoming a monthly supporter. And the address there is up on the screen, aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters. Please do check out that, and please do. We've got lots of rewards for people. You don't have to take any of the rewards if you don't want. They include back issues. They include our wee book for the union. Rewards are also including. We're now giving away free copies as well of Volume 1 of One Big Country, for a certain amount per month. So please do consider that. If you'd rather just drop a one-off to us, then the address is aforceforgood.uk/donate2, the numeral 2, aforceforgood.uk/donate2. If you just want to drop a one-off, 5 or a 10 or 50 quid, 5,000 quid, whatever the choice is yours, we can certainly put it to good effect. And if you'd just rather buy a copy of a wee book for the union, please do so at our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. Folks, it has been a blast. Again, thank you to all the viewers. Thank you to Richard who was with us today. Hopefully see you and everyone else soon. Yes, absolutely. Let's see you soon, Richard. It was a great day. Exile Viking, we will get back to you. Thank you for your message. Folks, it just remains for me to say we will be back next week. We have got a fantastic guest next week. It is going to be our good friend Damien Davies, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise. And the week after that, we'll have our other good friend, Luca Johnston, who hasn't been on for a while. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me just say thank you to all our viewers tonight. It just remains to say God bless the United Kingdom. Happy St. George's Day, and God save the King. See you next week.